Okay, the freezing temperatures are settling in, and it is time to think about how to make sure that your fish are happy and healthy over the winter time. And usually aeration and when the ice starts forming over the top of the pond is when fish struggle the most. So I want to show you how to use aeration and how to economically give the fish the best chance of survival over the winter time as you can. So let's take a peek at some of the ways that we found it works and what we do on our ponds here. Okay, so the first thing I find in keeping a fish happy in a pond outside over the winter is you need to keep an opening in the ice. Now, some people will leave their waterfalls running all winter long, so if you have an aquascape style skimmers and biofalls or a big waterfall that you can do that, great. Let it run all winter long. Just make sure you have access to a garden hose in your basement. Don't leave it outside. It'll probably be frozen if you need it. But just remember to keep access to water detoxifier to condition it and the ability to add fresh water in the winter time in order to make sure it's running. As long as your pond's running, most of the time, everything is happy. Outside of that, most of us shut our pumps off in the winter time, disconnect everything, shut it down. So now you got to make sure the fish are happy and healthy. Now, I don't care if it's leaf debris or if it's a heavy fish population, all that is organic matter. And so it's all going to be breaking down over the winter time, and all that process of degrading is going to release toxic gases into the water, and then it typically evaporates. The problem is when the ice starts forming on our ponds, all those toxic gases get trapped inside the pond, and they can build up and build up and build up. And then at some time, you never know how long it's going to take, it hits toxic levels. And next thing you know, your fish all start dying pretty quick. On a different note, short of just the toxic gases needing to get out of the water, if you have a lot of fish or big koi, they need more. They need extra aeration in order to get enough oxygen in there over the winter. You got to remember, in a wild native pond, there may be one fish per 10,000 gallons of water. Most of us only have a few thousand gallon per hour pond and maybe a dozen or two fish. So we need to pay attention to supplementing Mother Nature a little bit. So step one, make sure you have an opening in the ice. Step two, add extra aeration. Now let's take a look at how we found the easiest way to do that. This is what we use on all our ponds, unless we need much higher capacity. Then there's some bigger models we use. But we refer to these as deep water aerators, and it's a large compressor and a large diffuser, and it just cranks a ton of air. And so all that movement of bubbles through our pond will not only keep an opening in the ice, but it's also oxygenating the water. And so this now allows us to run one aerator instead of two devices. We can just run one, and it's great. As long as you hear that bubbles underneath the ice, you don't even have to worry about your pond anymore. So let's take a look at one of these in action. Okay, there's just a couple things with these aerators that we found worked. The trick is to go through and just put your compressor inside here. And they're rated for outdoors, but we find that we like to keep all aerators a little bit protected from the weather. I like snap-on lids so that they don't, the rain doesn't go. Sometimes if you have folding, collapsing lids, rain can get in there. Put a couple notches to get your tubing out, and just snap down your lids. Protects it from the weather. A key factor is to just throw, just to punch a couple drain holes in the bottom of your Rubbermaid containers in order to, if any snow or rain does get in there, it has the ability to drain out before it shorts out the compressor. I have seen it where the lids come off, or maybe get a really good storm and water starts getting in some of the holes and accumulates in there, or even the top blows off in a big storm. So having a rock on top for a little extra protection can't hurt either. So the key with these is we just take the compressor itself and we throw it inside a Rubbermaid tote. And that Rubbermaid tote, and I said Rubbermaid, it could be any storage tote, but the trick is to have the clip-on top lids, and then we bring the airline out. And so we just poke holes in the back to get the power cords out. Then we have the other one, bring the airline tubing out, and we throw it inside the pond. That will crank out like that all winter long. Now, the key is don't put it down at the deep part of your pond. Just throw it up about 12, 14 inches down, somewhere up on one of the mid-level shelves, because we want the warm water to settle down to the bottom. and that way the fish are insulated. We want all the cold water actually floats up to the top and then it freezes. The thicker that ice gets, the more it insulates the water underneath it. So we don't want to mix. If we took that air stone and threw it down on the bottom, we could what we call super cool our pond. And what we'd be doing is pumping all the warm water off the bottom of the pond, bringing it up to the surface, and then the ice can keep creeping. And so that's key on keeping the fish happy. They're gonna do their thing, gonna swim around until it's time to go dormant, then they'll go in their cave. We won't see them for the winter. And but as long as I can hear the bubbles under the ice, or I can walk up to my aerator and hear the humming of that. Typically what we'll do is if we get a tremendous amount of snow, we'll make sure that that is uncovered so that it can take in air. But outside of that, there's nothing much we do. We kind of let Mother Nature run her course. We just let that aerator keep the opening in the ice and oxygenate the water. Now what's going to happen is in the winter this is going to ice over. If we get frozen for 3-4 weeks, we never come above freezing. As the ice forms over the whole pond, there'll be a nice big opening here, then that opening will slowly start closing off. That's fine. In this setting with an aerator, what I find is it doesn't matter. We don't need to maintain an opening anymore. As long as that aerator is running, this will make a big dome and it'll even ice right over. But as long as I can hear the air bubble, it's doing its job. It's forcing the toxic gases out. They're going to the edges, they're finding cracks in the ice. All those toxic gases are being kind of forced out of our pond. And so it doesn't mean we'll never lose a fish over the winter, but we've never lost any fish to volume, a lack of aeration, or from toxic gases building up. Okay, so for now, just to keep your fish happy and healthy over the winter, that works very well. Heaters work, but please, if you have a lot of big koi and you are only using heaters, or we get people all the time that come in and say, I never use anything, my fish have been fine for 5 years. Well, it's usually that's the case. Somebody puts in a pond, they wait until they throw a couple goldfish in it, they throw a couple koi, in the first year they're fine. They do nothing, pond ice is over, the fish don't die. Year 2, year 3, all those fish are getting bigger. Then they start breeding. Next thing you know, by year 4 or 5, all the original fish are getting quite large. You've got babies, multiple generations of babies. The demand on the oxygen in the pond, the amount of organic matter in there is building up year after year, especially if you don't do cleanouts. The organic matter is building up year after year. That's when it happens. And then you wake up in the spring and say, what happened? It's not till you thawed out your pond or the pond thaws out in March, and then all of a sudden, all your fish are belly up. And it's really as simple as just keeping some aeration going, or a bare bones minimum, just throw a heater on there to keep an opening in the ice. But if you want the absolute lowest maintenance, best defense towards knowing that you're giving the fish what they need, just throw one of those big aerators on, set it, forget it, and just periodically check up on it and make sure that it's running and you can hear the bubbles underneath the ice, and that's it. All should be good until spring. Hope that helps. Take care.